Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, crypto nerds of all ages, we have two guests today from the DropChain network. We're going to talk today about mass adoption, single sign-ons, APIs. We're going to talk about going from web 2 to web 3. What is it going to take to get more people to use the fantastic technology that we all know as algorand? Stay tuned.
Now tuned in to the KryptoNurd podcast, brought to you by Citrus and ALGO Fund. Be sure to like and subscribe.
All right, boom. Welcome to the podcast. Carter, Nathaniel, I appreciate you being here. It's early morning for us, right?
Yeah, no, it's a little early. We're in the Midwest. It's you can see, I think Nate's room's a little dark. I have a lot of lights on, so it just looks bright, but it's not as bright as it looks.
I'm still drinking coffee from my my Eat Sleep Algorand Repeat mug here.
So... Mine isn't quite as creative, but I'm on the same energy.
Yes. All right. Well, good thing we got interesting topics this morning. So before we go into DropChain Network and what it's all about and all of the cool features there, I'd like the audience just to sort of get to know the both of you, just in a couple of short sentences, phrases here. Give us a little bit of background. Maybe Carter, can we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. So as you can see, my name's Carter Zink. I've been in the Web3 space for, a bit over 7 years now. I've been a tinkerer. I kind of started with mining and then, eventually made my way into building. And I have formally trained with 2 degrees in physics and math. And since I've kind of stepped into the space, I've recognized some of the core issues, and we'll kind of get into that with DropChain and how they're trying to fix it. But I'm really excited about what Web3 can do and kind of the future of blockchain technology.
Fantastic. Good intro stuff. All right. Nathaniel, what's give us your background.
Sure. Yeah. So Carter and I actually linked up roughly 5 or 6 years ago. We actually went to high school together, and we didn't really know each other back in high school. But since then, we've been working together on a number of projects and kind of getting into the Web3 space. I myself have been in Web3 since about 2017, in algorand since roughly 2020, I think. And I myself am more on the sales and marketing side of things. As a person who loves Web3 and blockchain technology and algorand and technology in general, but who doesn't know how to code, this is my contribution that I can make by telling people about the wonders of blockchain and Web3 and algorand and how it can improve their lives. So happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Nathaniel, you and I both have a kind of a similar path. We both got involved really kind of 2017, sales and marketing, and neither one of us is a coder. We were talking earlier about how, we got into this in like 2020, and I can't type code to save my life. But something that you're presenting in particular, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but the library, make sure that if I don't bring this up, make sure you remind me that we got to talk about the library that you guys are doing. Before we jump into that, though, before we get into like the nitty gritty and the details, let's just give like a quick overview of your project. What is DropChain? You kind of alluded to it a little bit there, Nathaniel, if you want to kind of just, expand on that just a little bit, and then Carter will get you to chime in there.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In one sentence, DropChain is a development toolkit that simplifies the process of building and using Web3 applications. The problem that we have seen, and we just put out a Twitter thread about it yesterday, so if you want to go check that out, please do. There's 2 problems that we see with Web3 right now. Number one is it's way too hard to build Web3 products. The skills between Web 2 and Web 3 just don't really transfer over as nearly as well as you might think. Even if you're a Web 2 developer, there's still a huge learning curve that it takes to get into Web 3. Tokenomics, security, smart contracts, all of these things. And the problem is that it's just too hard for the average person to break into the Web 3 space, meaning that there's just a low threshold of the number of projects moving into the space. Well, the number of Web3 developers is growing. It's not growing as quickly as we might hope. And because that barrier of knowledge is so hard, it's difficult to see new projects coming into the space and driving mass adoption. We compare it to the 1990s, how in 1998 or roughly around there, if you wanted to build a website or an internet company, you needed to know how to write code in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or something else. And now you can build a website in minutes with Squarespace, Wix, Webflow, anything like that. Similarly, today, if you want to build a Web3 application, you need to know how to code and a very specific, specialized set of knowledge or set of skills. With the DropChain, we hope to make that barrier of knowledge much lower by using APIs and the single sign-on to allow anybody, whether you know how to code at all or not, to build Web3 applications. The second side of it is that for the average user, using Web3 applications is far too difficult. For us, we've been in this space for a number of years. We can probably figure it out, even if there's a couple of headaches along the way. But hand your mom Para or a ledger and she'll be lost. The problem with that is people are just intimidated by the barrier of entry getting into Web3. Or if they do get into Web3, they don't know how to responsibly hold their assets, use these applications, manage their crypto. So the single sign-on portion of what we've created lowers that barrier to entry for users to be able to use applications without having to have that specialized knowledge, allowing the technology to work in the background. And rather than just focusing on the novelty of Web3 and blockchain, they can actually use the applications for the real benefit that they can provide in a real world way.
Well said. It sounds like somebody from sales and marketing has put together. I appreciate it. You have a succinct, like a definite, articulation of here's what we are, here's the problem that we are solving, and here's why that's important. Carter, let me ask you that same kind of a thing, but in a slightly different way, because are devs all over the country, all over the world, really just going to be mad at you for like making them obscure now? Right? Like, you're essentially creating a product that puts you out of business. Is this better for the community overall? And is it better for the dev community? And if so, why?
That's such a good question. And I think it's important to recognize that, DropChain isn't a panacea, right? It doesn't solve every problem that exists. It's simply a different approach to mass adoption. So conventionally, we have to go through the process of learning. Well, if you don't know how to code, you have to know how to code to at least some degree. No matter what, though, you have to know how to build a UI or know someone who can build a UI, a front-end interface. Then you need to learn the libraries of a language. So for Solidity, you need to know Web3.js. And you also need to learn Solidity or something similar to Solidity. Then you have to audit your code. And there's just so many things that go into building smart contracts alone that it's so prohibitive to people. So a lot of the people that would be using DropChain aren't the average, Web3 developers, right? This is not meant to replace decentralization. And in fact, this is almost supposed to supplement the growth of Web3 apps in the way that, you might have a Web3 power user experience with Para, with my ALGO wallet, right? And then you also have the Web2 focused experience where you have your same Web3 application, but you're also targeting Web2 natives. So it's not supposed to be like you're now no longer supposed to make websites if you have Wix, right? Because Wix is supposed to target, in the case of our parents, right? My mom's going to use Wix to build a website, not something like CSS and HTML to build that first website. So it's more so a bridge into the ecosystem. And if DropChain onboards regular end users through the single sign-on and onboards, future developers through the API, I'd say that's a win. And we're going to have more developers in the long run. So I don't think it's super competitive in that sense. It's supposed to be supplementary and it's supposed to have a different target market. We're not trying to target these power users. We're trying to target, we like to say the average Instagram user, average Twitter user who's never really used Web3, doesn't see the value. And with our tools, we're trying to make that core infrastructure layer to where builders can focus on building applications instead of having to learn for months on end these libraries, these languages to get to that point.
Yeah, well said. I think it's worth noting that your analogy there, your comparison to like the 90s and website building, right? Wix and WordPress didn't put website developers out of business. If anything, it grew that community, right? It made it much easier to create a website for startups. If you were just getting into it and you just needed a presence there, then you could have a presence relatively quickly. And that didn't stop you from having to grow and expand and get a more advanced product in place further down the road. And so if anything, I could see something like this really kind of kickstarting that mass adoption, which is probably our next thing we should talk about. And mass adoption, I think, really, like, there's a limited number of devs. So, if something like mass adoption takes place, we're going to have tools in place in order to leverage the limited amount of devs that we have available, so that they are really working on high quality projects. This kind of helps the starter folks get into place, dip their toe into the ecosystem, get the ecosystem to grow, and then move on. I really, really like the idea of mass adoption and what your project really means and how easy it is to convert from Web 2 to Web 3. I want to touch on single sign-on and APIs and some of the cool features that you've got kind of baked in there, and a couple of things still to come too. Carter, why don't you take the con on this and talk to us about mass adoption and really like what the tools are, and then Nathaniel, you could kind of jump in there as well, and maybe talk about how you're going to market this and how you're going to get those people because if they don't know it's there, then you can build the greatest tools in the world, but if nobody uses it, then we won't see that mass adoption. So I really see this as a two-headed monster here. But Carter, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. So I think you're 100% correct. There's kind of these two core points that we've talked about where there's barriers, massive barriers to enter into the ecosystem through these both sides, right? The API is supposed to address the developer barrier to entry. And the idea is we want to take smart contracts. We want to take pre-made contract or pre-made transaction templates, and we want to make it easy to integrate that into existing Web2 technology where we actually just released a bubble.io. It's a no-code Web2 application developer where you can now build Web3 apps using this bubble infrastructure that's already existing external to us, or a Wix or a Webflow as well. And you can combine that with our API stack. So basically, we're trying to make it really simple for developers to exist and to build. And on the flip side, this is not really valuable if the core end user who's going to use your product still needs to be able to, install, download a wallet and save their passphrase or mnemonic, as their first wallet. Because I kind of explain the state of Web3 for end users today in the analogy of an email inbox, that if you open the wrong email, your inbox just gets deleted. And that's unfortunately the state of the Web3 technology for end users, for wallets today. And I'm not going to be able to convince my parents or my aunts and uncles to start using this technology because they don't trust themselves to use it. And if that means they're going to lose their I don't want to say life savings, because hopefully they'll be a little bit strategic with
there should be some diversification there, but yeah,
exactly, yeah. And so even just teaching them what it means to have a hot wallet and a cold wallet or a ledger, these things are complicated, but not to us because we've been in it. And so simplifying that process, combining the easy to build app with the easy to adopt app it's necessary for mass adoption. And as far as I'm aware, that's not something that's really tapped on within other infrastructure providers. And we're kind of we're that first mover infrastructure provider for developers to build those mass adoptable apps.
Yeah, I really believe that we've got to reduce those barriers of entry, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's this elitism that we've been in here since 2017, since the height of the last peak, right? There was that mania, and there's a little bit of pride that says, hey, we can do this, and if you can't handle this, not your keys, not your wallet, buyer beware kind of a thing. And we pride ourselves on being smarter, but it doesn't really help us in the long run. No. We don't need to be exclusive. It's not a cool kids club. We want it to be. We want everybody to take part in this. All right, Nathaniel. So how are you planning on making this known? Because Carter's going to work. He's building the most amazing stuff. Your job is to make sure that everybody knows that it exists. How are you going to get that into the hands of everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it is a kind of a scaled approach that'll kind of happen over time. I mean, we've only been working on this project for roughly 5-6 months at this point. The first roughly half of that was spent building out our version 1 launch. The next month or two was just working with other developers in our Discord and DMing people on Twitter just to get feedback. Because before we really did a huge push on trying to get people to start using the application, we want to make sure that it works properly and that it's secure and everything like that. So thank you to all of the devs who gave us So much valuable feedback as we were building out our first version 1 launch. The second portion of it is just working with the very tight-knit community that Algorand already has. We've had a lot of success just by being on Twitter and joining up with Algorand Twitter Spaces, talking with creators like you, DMing other Algorand projects that are working within the space. So I think right now Algorand is kind of the perfect point where, it's small enough where we can kind of turn into a big fish and start to get that feedback and get that initial traction. And then over time, we do plan on becoming multi-chain. So if you go into our website and you look at our roadmap, towards the end of next year, we do want to become EVM compatible, which will open us up to a much wider swath of groups, all who are using EVM. So while Algorand definitely has the best technology, I mean, that's why we decided to build on Algorand in the first place. It is the perfect kind of starter area to get this started, and then kind of towards next year, expanding the market out. And we have a number of strategies kind of to get us to that place, but we're working on it every day.
All right, sounds good. Well, one of the main things is you mentioned it, having a product that actually works and getting that feedback. You mentioned V1. I know you've run some beta. I know that you've got working products now, and you've got V2 that if it didn't launch, it's coming up shortly. I want to talk about what's different between V1 to V2 and how that process is for getting feedback, and what are some unexpected changes and feedback that you received from your first go around.
Carter, go ahead.
Carter. Yeah. No, I got you. So for the V1, I think the big thing is we were testing our core API stack. So we're gonna attack one of the two barriers. We got to first attack the developers, because that's kind of our bread and butter. That's how we grow as a company, is by creating a good product for developers. What's new with the V2 is a single sign-on, right? So now these developers can build these tools, build these applications, build these games, and they can now be adopted by the masses, really just using conventional Web2 credentials. So you can now sign into a DropChain app built on Algorand using a Google sign-in, right? Or an email and password. And as long as it's built with the DropChain API, this functions and allows Web2 users to start adopting that. And then kind of looking forward to, in the pipeline, we're looking to take some of these contracts, some of these smart contracts, kind of like an Open Zeppelin. It's really, Open Zeppelin's like a smart contract repository, kind of an all-in-one place where all these contracts can stay and be audited and be used by a bunch of people within the developer community. We're working with Reach to make these smart contracts much more functional and much more widely adoptable using the API and kind of bring these Web3 applications to the next level.
Great. Now, is that part of the library that I mentioned at the top of the show? That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess, Nate, you can kind of hit on that as well, but really we're just trying to simplify the process of building smart contracts and using smart contracts. And better yet, if you don't even have to build a smart contract, that's better, because you're not trying to, there's no security risk because it's already audited. You don't have to worry about learning the language. You just have to worry about how you're going to use the contract. I think that's kind of one of the biggest things we had requested. And so that's kind of what we're hitting on next.
Nice. A quick question before we jump over about the marketing side and the growth there. You mentioned audited. Now, are you worried that this is essentially peer-to-peer, right? Or are you taking these in and having them audited yourself? Are you vouching for the accuracy of these? I mean, they're smart contracts, so like they work. But when you start throwing in audited, people worry about that. They're like, hey, is this audited? Who audited it? What's the validity of this? How do I know there's not some kind of a secret backdoor? Or they're siphoning off fractions of my my crypto, sending it somewhere else.
Yeah. So that's a super good question. And I think one of the first things to kind of recognize right now is that we aren't a conventional public chain like Algorand is. And in fact, we're almost similar to a layer 2 on top of Algorand. We're centralized. We're incorporated in Delaware. We're pretty legally sound in that sense. And so when it comes to our infrastructure, we're really trying to be a sandbox for Web2 natives, to where if they mess up, they forget their password, we can help them recover this. And we can help help them, potentially, work with an application that they messed up on and kind of make it right by, giving a refund or vice versa. And so when it comes to these audited smart contracts, some of them are audited by the community. And so it's more of a, check it on your own. Some of them are audited by algorand, official auditors. So in the same way, Tiny Man had an exploit and then they got re-audited. Unfortunately, audits don't really mean much, especially if
it's not a guarantee by any means. Yeah,
exactly. But thankfully, for the way we're architected, we're a layer 2 and we have much more control over the chain. So in the way that we're set up, we can help rectify wrongs in the event that they go on chain. And so we can roll back a chain. We can help applications if they've sent assets to a wrong address. We can rectify that because we have full control over the chain, because we're trying to create a layer 2 that functions as a sandbox for these early adopters. It's best to kind of, in the same way you wouldn't bring a first-time driver to like the interstate or the highway to learn how to drive. You need to toss them in a garage or sorry, a safe,
like a parking
safe
lot
area,
or
a parking lot. Right. You got to back out first before you can actually drive your car. That's kind of what we're trying to do now. And that allows us to have a lot more flexibility on the security of our smart contracts.
All right. Excellent. Nate, you got something to add on there?
Yeah, just a little bit to add on. So just to kind of quell expectations a little bit. So the DropChain library we're expecting to put out in either late 2023 or early 2024, kind of get that early MVP out. And at that stage, that's when we're really going to be starting to work with our community and developers to say, like, how do you want this to function, and help us come up with these decisions. I mean, we don't consider ourselves to be, all-knowing oracles of the algorand community or Web3 developer community. So we will definitely be working very, very closely with developers within our Discord to get their input, to understand, how as a Web3 developer does it make sense for you to best monetize your code through this DropChain library. If you're a non-developer, what is the best use case for you to take these smart contracts from this library and implement them into your either programmed app or no-code app in Bubble or Wix or anything like that. So we will be working very, very closely with our community throughout this year within our Discord to kind of come up with those more, important decisions that will have a real effect on the community, because we do want this to be a two-sided marketplace. So I think you had mentioned the Discord will be in the show notes. So if you have some input, please come and join us. Tell us if we're screwing up or tell us if we're doing something great. We need your input.
Yeah, good stuff. I think it's really important to grow that community so that when you do come up with a marketplace like this, you've got a strong backing of people who contribute, and that will drive that mass adoption where it'll there'll be plug and play contracts available. So I really like what you're doing. There will be some purists, let's just say, who are against this idea, but it always baffles me because why would you, don't yuck my yum, right? There's new people that come in. We want to get that exposure. And just because you were, stuck in this OG, not my keys, not my wallet, not my crypto kind of a thing, it doesn't mean that somebody else can't come in and say, okay, well, Coinbase is so easy to use. You guys could revolutionize the way that, kind of the Web3 interactions take place.
Absolutely. And I think that's so it's a little weird because I'm sort of a purist myself. Like at the end of the day, I also recognize there's downsides to not being decentralized in the same way that some algorand or some, Bitcoin, Ethereum, these chains are decentralized. But I think it's important to recognize that the alternative to our average end user, our parents, our grandparents, to using Web3 is to just not use it. They're not that's like saying, trying to convince some of the internet. It makes sense now. It looks stupid now, but they didn't need the internet back in the day. And unless the internet got more easily adoptable by these applications, these infrastructure providers, these services that make it easy to adopt, the alternative isn't to go to, Facebook Meta's chain. It's to just not use crypto. And so we need to be the people, us as a community, to convince these end users that they need to self-custody. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to convince these end users that they should have their own wallet and they should self-custody their own assets. We don't want to hold on to their keys any longer than we need to. And in fact, it's kind of a risk on our part to do that.
And I also think it's an interesting point what you brought up, Monty, about how the whole not my crypto, not my keys. It feels like within the last year or so that opinions have shifted a little bit on that, where yes, we all understand that not my crypto, not my keys, but in order to get to a point where we get to mass adoption, we're going to have to make some concessions. I don't think anybody within the crypto community would say that Coinbase is a bad thing. I mean, as long as they're a good actor and they don't do an FTX, then nobody's going to complain, because that is the on-ramp for so many people. That was my first experience with crypto. It was Coinbase, and then it was Exodus, and then I got into actually, wallets and things like that. So to your point, I think that there's going to be a lot of purists that are going to be, angry about the potential of bringing new people into the ecosystem. But what you said at the top of the show was, I mean, who does that benefit? I mean, we need to get more people into the space, and avoid just saying, come use Web3 for the novelty, and actually come and use Web3 for the benefit of the product. I mean, I've said as a marketing guy, I can't market something that's not useful. So if you want to make a successful product in any industry, whether it's Web3 or traditional tech, you have to make it useful and you have to make it easy to use. And DropChain's whole focus is abstracting away the convoluted, crap that goes into Web3, and make it easy and useful for the average person. Yeah.
Let's shift. Let's talk about a use case. My friends over at NIFGen, I saw the news that you had partnered with them, and specifically, I'm excited about the single sign-on access that you're going to provide. But walk us through the use case. How are they going to use DropChain? What's it do for them, and how will it help their audience grow?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's good to break down some of the two core user personas, if you will. One of them is someone who doesn't know how to build a Web3 app and doesn't really have any alternatives. So it's either you use DropChain and it's easy, or you spend a couple months learning how to build smart contracts and whatnot, and coding if you don't know that, all that fun stuff. The other customer persona, the other customer segment, is existing Web3 apps who already have a presence in Web3, who want to add an additional target market. And that additional target market is Web2 natives. So imagine you have a Web3 app, but you need a wallet to use it. You've already cut 85-90% of your market out. If you allow Web2 natives to also use your application in addition to Web3 power users, you allow significantly faster growth. And really, you don't have to limit to algorand communities. You don't have to specifically target people within algorand. You can now build a brand around your product, which is how product-led companies are supposed to work. And so NIFGen is just using our single sign-on to enable end users to start using Web3 without having to know any of the technology that goes into it. Really just trying to allow their application to be mass adoptable. And that's what the single sign-on is all about.
Great. Now, let me ask you this. So somebody creates an account and they log in through their, their Google, it's their password is stored, their personas, it, logs them in. It creates the account, but how do you recommend funding? So let's say they go in somewhere, but they need, $20 for a subscription, or, whatever their services that are logging in for that is Web3 enabled. Is there a partner that you're working with? Is it in the roadmap at some point in time to easily, on-ramp?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And that's actually one of the next things. Once we kind of get feedback and iterate on this V2 with the single sign-on, that's the next thing on the list, right? And that's fiat on-ramp. And so what that looks like is, because we're sort of a semi-public, semi-private, depending on how you want to look at this blockchain, we have significantly higher flexibility when it comes to on-ramping fiat, where you don't need to go to a Coinbase to buy algos to start using, algorand-based products. You can now just use your fiat credit card. Because if you try to defraud or try to, cheat the system, cheat an application out of their NFT, you just don't get the NFT. And we can take it back and we can limit that. So we have customization and control over the way people can mess around, I guess, within the system. But now you have the flexibility to also on-ramp these end users who just want to buy an NFT with a credit card. And that's, from a functional perspective, that's almost done. And it's really just we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We want to make sure this first product is where it needs to be. But from a fiat on-ramp, we're looking to allow some of our early beta adopters and paid customers to use that within the next couple months, if not the quarter one of 2023.
Wow, that's really fast. Okay, I'm glad I asked about that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's such a key portion of this whole thing. You can create a wallet and access, but if you can't do anything with it, you need to figure out, okay, how do I convert the way that I'm used to paying. Right.
Well,
and if I'm a project, hey, I want to take your money in any way that you want to go ahead and submit it to me, right? Whether or not that's credit card or you already had crypto or whatever it is, I want to earn that business.
And from the end user perspective as well, right? You can buy an NFT, you can buy tokens, fungible tokens with a credit card or US dollars. But then you can also export those assets to mainnet. So in a way that we're sort of layer 2, end users still get that flexibility to be able to take their NFT they just bought with dollars and then export it to their own self-custody wallet. So we're trying to play to both the power users and those who don't know anything about crypto, anything of Web3, and allow them to participate in NFTs or whatever Web3 has to provide them.
We're going to have a conversation offline because we need your service for ALGO Fund. We've already got the KYC set up to, for a couple of the next stages we've got going for ALGO Fund. But people ask me all the time, hey, if we want to buy into new projects, we're interested, but we don't already own crypto. You make it difficult. Like we got to trade here. We got to go get the NURD token. Or we got to go get the ALGO Fund token. And it's hard, right? If you're a layperson, we make you jump through some freaking hoops to be part of the community. And there's a lot of, savings that folks are sitting on right now that they would like to deploy, but they just literally can't. So something like this would actually work very well for our project too, just as an aside.
Yeah. One other thing to add on to that too, as we're talking about kind of the safety and the use case for the average Web2 user like my mom, how not only is it difficult to use, it's often dangerous to use. Kind of what Carter said earlier in the show about how if you click on the wrong button and your inbox gets deleted, kind of that email analogy. A similar thing is like allowing people to immediately have self-custody of their keys, if they're the average Web2 user, can be dangerous in a lot of ways. I mean, if you lose your keys, like, sorry, tough. I know this is your first experience with Web3, and now you're probably never going to come back. Imagine making your first online payment on Amazon, first ever online payment, and you got scammed. It would make you question whether you ever want to use the internet again for payments. In a similar vein, we think that this next wave of adoption, the creators have a responsibility to educate people in order to give them self-custody. So we haven't gotten this fully played out yet, and we're planning on doing this again later in the year or early next year. But basically making a earned or learn to custody type of process. So either you have to prove that you've been in crypto for X amount of time, you've had a wallet for over, a year or something like that, or you've watched a certain amount of videos or something to say that you are educated and you know how to responsibly hold your keys and you know what that means. I think that we have a responsibility to say, sure, you can hold your keys, but you have to prove that you're going to be responsible with them, because we don't want to be on the hook when you lose your keys and then then we can't help you. So I think that is going to be I think the purists might have some issues with that, but I think it's a necessary step. in order to get to the next stage of adoption.
Yeah, I agree. And I would bet that there are thousands of others who agree as well. And hopefully they all start using your services. Right. It's amazing. It's been a little over half an hour already. I want to try and wrap this up with maybe something just a little more lighthearted in the ecosystem itself. I'm curious, what other projects are you guys watching right now?
Yeah, I can take the lead, and then Nate, you can kind of finish it off. But I a little shameless plug. I just bought a mango, so I like that community. I've always liked the art behind some of these algorand projects, and so I like the NFT community. I still think that in the long run we have to adopt or adapt and get additional utility for these NFTs, whatever that looks like. I don't know exactly, and I think time will tell. Hopefully, DropChain can allow that to be the case. I'm a huge fan of the Algorand Gaming Guild, so they have been doing some really cool stuff. I like kind of the community they've built, and they're working on a really cool project. So definitely check them out on Twitter. Shouts out to them. They've been a lot of help for this V2 feedback session. And then a little bit of another shameless plug. Shout out to the DropChain apps building within Algorand using our tech. So NifGen, Clip, which is an NFT marketplace within out of Nigeria, Odia, which is Midwest native, actually building a music social economy, and then Super ALGO, which is a game studio. Those are just a few of 15 or 20 different developments that are building on DropChain. Shouts out to you guys, and looking forward to a really exciting 2023.
True story. Before we logged in for this interview, I was checking my quests. I've got my mostly friends, my Mingos, my Yieldling. Their Stitch Bob has done a fantastic job for that NFT community. And I love the Gaming Guild too. I've had a lot of communication with those folks. There's just a lot going on.
For sure.
All right, Nate, what are you watching?
Well, Carter, you stole mine. I was going to say the Algorand Gaming Guild too, but there are still plenty of other ones. One that I was actually tipped off to just this morning or last night was Gushyland. I haven't really had a chance to dig into it too much, but I tweeted something out, and I was complaining about Axie Infinity, and I was saying how Algorand will be the chain for gaming. Gushyland, from what I understand, and I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, team, is it looks like they're kind of being a direct competitor with Axie. And I actually played Axie for a long time, and I thought it was really fun. It just sucked because ETH sucks. So I'm really excited for that one. Also, ALGO Ocean, they're going to be using DropChain to build out a no-code NFT tool. So really excited to see what they're going to be coming up with. So there's a lot of stuff happening. It's hard to pick just one, but I'm especially bullish on the gaming community within Algorand.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, guys.
Yeah.
We're going to have you back on because there are still topics we haven't even touched on yet, but we're just out of time. So, this is my excuse to force you guys to drop back in and give the updates on the next milestones and all the stuff we couldn't touch on, so far today. So appreciate you both stopping by. Any last words out to the community?
No, I'd probably leave them with this. If you're considering or building a Web3 app and you haven't really pulled the trigger yet, maybe because it's too hard or too much time to put into it, check out dropchain.network. Make a free beta account, just because we're kind of in the process of wrapping up this beta, and we don't know if what we're gonna do really. It's completely free to get started, and check out our Discord. And if you have any questions, I like to help out. So I like to be there and a little mini customer support for this start, and I want to get more developers in the space, and this is how you do it. So definitely check us out.
Good stuff. Well, go ahead, Nate.
The future belongs to builders, so keep building. That's all I'll say. Enjoy the Discord. That's all.
Right. Well, everybody, thanks for watching, or thanks for listening to the podcast. As always, I am your crypto nerd.